I cannot tell you, this is one of the most exciting podcasts that we have done on Sober Life Rocks because when we first started, the whole goal was that there didn't seem to be a place that professionals were supported in their sober choices. And I have with me today two guests who are going to talk about how they are trailblazing change for you, the professionals in your workplaces.
Welcome to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. You may have made the decision not to drink alcohol, or at the very least, not at work-related events. Whether you've never been a drinker, are in recovery, or made a health-related decision, we see you, and you are not alone. In today's world, networking, socializing, and celebrations often happen over drinks, and the struggle can be real. Through this podcast, we're changing that narrative. We're here to create a community where individuals like you, who choose not to drink or drink less, can find camaraderie, support, and practical advice.
Before we get started, Sober Life Rocks is hosting a conference, Amplify Sober Voices, on January 15th, 2026, where we're bringing together influencers and speakers, writers, and podcasters to reimagine what a truly inclusive, alcohol-optional world looks like. And if you're interested in being part of the growing movement we're seeing, we'd love to have you join us. Learn more at amplifysobervoices.com. So welcome to Sober Life Rocks. Today, we are exploring how companies are rethinking workplace culture to support employees in sobriety and why it matters more than ever. Joining us is Marin Nelson, co-founder and CEO of Sobrynth, a company leading the charge in making workplaces recovery-friendly with powerful cultural tools and 24/7 peer support. Marin brings over 19 years of recovery and a decade plus of leadership experience in enterprise sales, including her time at Salesforce, where she co-founded the employee resource group SoberForce. We're also joined by Abby Flynn, Senior Human Resource Manager at Olympia Hospitality, a company that's walking the talk when it comes to inclusive, supportive environments. Abby is leading efforts to build policies and culture that empower employees in recovery, not just to survive, but to thrive. So welcome to the two of you.
Thank you so much for having us, Margie. I'm thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. So, Mara, let me just start with you because I know you from being one of the co-founders of SoberForce at Salesforce. So tell me a little bit about your story and how that came to be.
Yeah, I know it's been a while since we've known each other. It's been fun to see Sober Life Rocks and now Sobrynth. And yes, it started really with creating SoberForce at Salesforce. So I was a leader at Salesforce and at the time 15 years sober, and it was during COVID. And I connected with a few sober sales leaders, and we were talking about just, the challenges of and the impact on our communities, which we now have all the data that shows drinking accelerated, overdoses were at an all-time high, relapses were happening, and we said we got to do something to help the fellow employee or fellow colleagues. And so we created a group called SoberForce, which was within the framework of an employee resource group. And it was incredibly successful. We had 500 members, employees, join us in 5 months' time to talk about their sobriety, their sober curiosity, their sober allyship. We had leaders joining us who just wanted to do some sort of virtual team building that was not yet another virtual wine tasting. And it was incredibly successful. It continues to be. I just actually spoke with a current member today who joined when he very first got sober in 2021, and now he's doing sober podcasts. So, it's just the coolest thing ever to watch it spider out and bring influence in lots of spaces.
So, Maren, one of the things I'm so curious about, though, is I myself was secretly sober in my professional life for 18 and a half years because, when I got sober 20 years ago, the stigma was real and it still exists. So
Yeah.
how do you feel like that was able to happen in this, high-tech world?
I mean, a moment of delusion. I don't know. I felt so nauseous when I was going to post my story because I knew I was posting it to, in theory, 75,000 colleagues globally could have read this post that I shared, like my most vulnerable truth about my addiction journey and why I got sober at 24 and what that looked like and now what my life is like now. But we had this mantra amongst the 4 co-founders of SoberForce, and it was, if we help one person, this whole thing is worth it. And so I just kept repeating that in my head as I went to hit post, and my hands were shaking. I was 15 years sober. To your point, like, it wasn't new. Like, you know, yes, can you relapse in theory at any point? Sure. But at 15 years, you know, pretty stable in my sobriety journey at this point. Still, I felt super nervous. But literally within minutes, I got a phone call from someone, and it still makes me like get goosebumps, because he said, I literally was just searching in the company intranet sober, and I found your post on this thing called SoberForce. And I think he was 5 days sober. I'm 5 days sober. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea how to do this. I remember you not drinking at that company dinner. I didn't know why you weren't drinking, but it stuck with me, as it does when you are someone with alcohol use disorder. You notice the people not drinking and you wonder how they're doing it. And he said, what do I do? And so I was able to share my own experience with him. He got connected to another sober Salesforce person. And as far as I know, he's still sober today and an active member of SoberForce. So that, it was just like the universe. It was like a gift from the universe. It was like, I know you're nervous because this is really vulnerable, but like, here, this matters. Like, this is why you're doing this.
So how did it change the culture at Salesforce, if at all?
Oh, I think it really did. I mean, I continue to have the gift of people reaching out saying, hey, I never got a chance to meet you because you'd left Salesforce, but I'm a member of SoberForce and I just want to thank you. I mean, like, and that's not why I did it. I didn't do it for the praise, but it just is humbling how it continues to run in spite of 3 of the 4 co-founders have since left the company. It's got new leadership in place and it keeps going. It's inspired the Office of Accessibility, and they're really known globally at Salesforce for really changing the game when it comes to accessibility in the workplace. And they do sober inclusive events. So like every event, there's meetups of SoberForce members. They have mocktails. They put that front and center. They look at how do they talk about this? How do they normalize this? I mean, they did a dry January program that was really successful. They have Dreamforce sober happy hours that sold out in 24 hours, like this big giant conference of 200,000 people that descend upon San Francisco. And we planned a sober happy hour and it sold out immediately. Because the thing is, it wasn't just the employees, it was the customers too.
Yeah.
So the customers who are not feeling a part of, or, you know, because they didn't drink and they don't want to go to all the drinking based events, and now they had a chance to gather and connect and network without being in that environment. I think that opened a lot of eyes too.
Oh my gosh, that just makes me so happy. I like literally want to like go be part of. So from there, how did you get to where you are now with Sobrynth? And tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the awareness for me, it was a gradual process. I never intended to go start a company. I was like fully climbing that corporate ladder at Salesforce. But I started getting calls from other companies, other sober employees who would hear podcasts and say, hey, I want to do what you did. Can you help me? And so I just did a bunch of kind of like free consulting and coaching of other sober employees trying to stand up sober ERGs. But what was continuously missing was that I would get these phone calls from employees who were seeking help, like tangible care navigation help and coaching, like almost like they wanted me to coach them on their sober journey. And this was not my full-time job. This was not something I was paid on. This was not something I was measured on. My job was a sales leader and running a team of enterprise sellers. And so I did it because I was passionate about it, but it was tough as an employee to also keep this thing afloat, right? And so what would happen is I get these calls from individuals who are saying things like, I've got a teenager in crisis with substance use. I'm spending 5 hours a day trying to figure out what treatment center to send them to. I don't even know if they need to go to treatment. I have no idea what I'm doing. And oh, by the way, I called the EAP and it was not a good experience. I got redirected back to insurance. They gave me a bunch of inpatient treatment numbers. They told me to go call them myself. Half of them don't take teenagers. Half of them don't have a bed. What do I do? And I was completely ill prepared and not the appropriate person to be answering that question. But I was the only one they felt safe calling, and they had already tried the resources we had and they didn't work. And so that for me, that experience being not a one-off, but a continuing experience that I had with other people was when I started to look at, how do we not have this solved in the benefit space? Like, how there must be a solution out there. But in the next breath, I'm like, but Salesforce has like the best benefits ever. Like we had benefits for everything. And I couldn't find anything that would match this need. And so hence creating Sobrynth with my amazing co-founder, Ingrid Lindberg, because I just was not okay with this not being solved. It felt like wrong that we haven't solved for this in the benefit space yet. And so the thought of if not me, who was pretty persistent because it's a huge risk to go out and start a company. But it just honestly felt like the morally right thing to do. Like I see a problem. I know that there's a solution here. Like I have to go try to solve it.
Okay, so last question before we move on to Abby. In a nutshell, then, what is Sobrynth today?
Yeah, so Sobrynth is really primarily two main parts. Half of our solution is culture change to enable and encourage and empower our customers to become recovery ready workplaces. So everything from communications, how do you talk about this? How do you train your people leaders to talk about substance use disorder and where to get help? Branding and communications around it, like the posters and the postcards and all the rest. So that's half of the solution is like, how do you talk about this as an organization?
Mhm.
And how do you find an executive who's in sobriety who will share their story to destigmatize this? Because there's so much stigma that keeps people hiding. The rates are insane. It's 1 in 10 employees, if not greater, that have active untreated substance use disorder in the workplace. 1 in 10, 10%. That is a huge number that is going untreated. The other half of our solution is 24/7, 365 care navigation and care navigation to all pathways. So subclinical, meaning like I'm looking for a 12-step meeting. I'm looking for not AA, but another kind of group. Where would I go? I'm looking for a sober living facility because I'm not safe at home. Where could I live? To inpatient and other outpatient care programs. So we do care navigation and then we do peer coaching to people answering the phone or people in recovery. So you're not reaching a general call center person, you're reaching someone who understands. And when there's so much shame that goes with this disease, it's so important to talk to someone who's like, I get it, I've been there, you can do this, I'm in this with you, let's create a plan together.
It's beautiful, beautiful. So Abby, you are HR of a hospitality company. So tell me just a little bit about what is your role? What is the company that you're part of?
Sure. So I am the Senior Human Resources Manager for Olympia Hospitality. We've are based out of Portland, Maine. We have 42 locations between lodging, resort, restaurants across the country. We're a Maine-based family-owned organization, though, and I've been a part of them for just over 21 years. I'll be coming up on my 22nd year in September. So it really is a testament, I think, to the company and as a whole, the value structure that exists, which really, I think, has helped launch this partnership with Sobrynth and our exploration of the recovery-friendly workplace. My role specifically, I work in, started off, most of my time has been in the GM chair for the company. So I've been in the field, been in the hotels, was a GM for about 12 years with them in 2 different locations. And since then, I've been up at home office, really focusing on the recruitment efforts, talent acquisition. But what has come from that is really an exploration into our benefit space and what we, how can we recruit top talent? How can we maintain top talent? And most importantly, how can we take care of that talent? And a part of that is really an exploration of a lot of wellness initiatives has been where our focus has been.
But honestly, recovery-friendly workplace is like a radical idea in some areas. I mean, it's brand new, right? People don't even understand what that means. And so how did you even identify that that might be a need?
Well, it's been a little bit of an evolving process. So one, I do think we have the benefit of being based out of Maine and therefore proximity to New Hampshire, both of which states have their own individual recovery-friendly workplace platforms. So I think there's more support here where in our home-based state. But we actually had an employee who is a director of sales for our property address or at our conference last year for our GMs and DOSs. We get together every year. Had launched into a conversation with our Vice President of Human Resources at that conference about sobriety, her own path in sobriety, and really the fact that, you know, at a lot of conferences and things, they're centered around social drinking. And so it launched into a conversation about how we are recognize more and support our sober community, you know, our sober employees. And she introduced us to Marin and the Sobrynth platform and said, hey, can we explore this? You know, here's a company I'd love to explore. Let's talk about it. And so we entered into conversations with Marin and just really started to explore what this would look like with the pretense, you know, to play off of something you said, Marin, was really about if we can help one person, then we've done our jobs essentially. For me, it was a little bit more of a personal connection. I was in the GM chair during COVID, and particularly in the geographical area where I was, there was a large opioid issue, and we had a lot of problems with alcoholism within our own staff that I saw. And I had an employee who came to me who said they needed help getting into rehab. They were essentially at the end of their path with alcohol in a very dangerous space. And they needed assistance, and they came to me and trusted me enough to ask. And I found the process of trying to find a program for them to be very challenging. It was hard to know where to start. It took a lot of phone calls. Fortunately, I had some resources and connections in the area that were able to point me in the right direction. But it came right down to, I had to, you know, I physically took this employee to the detox center. I had to pick them up because there wasn't resources for transportation or that I could find on my own. And it was a very time-consuming process. It was very rewarding. I would say about 6 months later, I got a message from this employee's mother who said she just wanted to acknowledge that had I not stepped in when I did and risen to the challenge, that she did not think her daughter would be alive today. But when Carrie brought this to our attention about the platform, it reminded me of that time. And fortunately, I had the bandwidth and the desire to want to be able to help and know where to start to look. But I knew that our GMs and our leaders at our hotels I was not the only person dealing with these conversations and these issues. So it made total sense to be able to provide them a resource that said, you know, concern for others is one of our values. Here's how we lean into this, and here's how we show up in that space by providing, you know, resources for our team leaders to say, hey, you know, let's call this line, let's get this support for you and find, you know, get you on your path.
That's so beautiful, and thank you for stepping up for that young woman. We all need that hand held out to us.
Well, it was a mutually beneficial experience, I think, because it got me, actually, a lot of the conversations that I was able to enjoy with her got me started on my own sober journey, and exploration of what sober lifestyle looked like. And, you know, I quickly came to realize that it was something that I valued for my own space and my own existence. So I would be remiss if I didn't say it was a mutually beneficial experience.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. So tell me then, so you started talking with Marin, what has been rolled out and how has that been received throughout the organization?
I will say that Sobrynth, you know, the part of their program that really helped with the communication aspect of it has been excellent. It was a multi-step process. We were very fortunate to have our VP of openings, Greg McLean, come to the table. He has been you know, long outspoken individual in his own sobriety journey. So he was willing to be our executive sponsor, and Sobrynth provided us some templates and emails that we were able to customize. He was able to customize to really introduce himself to the entire team member database that we have, to really talk about his own journey and his story, and to launch us into the the reason why we're really exploring this space, and to provide some safety to our employees to say, here's a VP of our company stepping up and acknowledging himself as a person in sobriety, and that it is okay for us to explore this. From there, our VP of Human Resources sent out some communications, essentially launching the Sobrynth platform. We did send communications, posters and postcards. The postcards were in English and Spanish to accommodate some additional language, which Sobrynth was able to help us get translated. So we sent material to the hotels to display in our employee-centered areas. And from there, we just launched a lot of communication through our communication platform to the employees. We followed that up with the launch of our ERG group, which eventually we settled on the name Olympia Cares, which stands for Community for Awareness, Empowerment, Recovery, and Sobriety. And even designed a logo for it to go along with it. And so that group meets monthly. We've had our VP of Openings speak on it. We've had our Director of Marketing come on and talk about her experience with sobriety. I've shared my own journey. Our Director of Sales in Chicago, who kind of launched this whole program for us, was able to share. And we've had even down to, some hourly team members hop on there. So we're really kind of still exploring how to continue to build that and assess the needs for it. We just had a survey that went out, an anonymous survey, to talk to our team members, and just to, for our industry, the hospitality industry specifically, a recent survey that I was doing and preparing for another call was, 17% of hospitality workers report having a substance use disorder. And in our own organization, 12% of the people that responded to this survey that I sent out all said that they were in recovery from substance use or alcohol use disorder. So in addition to that, 50% of those employees that responded said that they had a friend or family member that were in active addiction or were on the path to recovery.
Wow.
So, there is an innate need everywhere, but specifically in our industry where it's 24/7, long hours, access to substances, of really just creating a culture surrounding wellness and providing people resources to be able to start that journey and the safe space to explore that.
I'm literally like, I want to cry. I'm so grateful to you and your organization for doing this, and Marin, for you bringing this, because like I didn't have any of that. I didn't have anybody who would understand. And in fact, it felt very much the opposite. My job was literally to go out and wine and dine people and bring in new consultants into our company. And I remember that very first time that I sat down at a group dinner with all of these speakers and researchers and consultants. And as the host, in comes the big wine book. I was 6 weeks sober. And these were all of my best friends. This was the directory of my best friends. And I had to look at this and go, I'm not really sure how to pick a wine. Can somebody else do it for me? Had I had an organization that supported me and knew what was going on with me, or had resources for me, like what a different experience that would have been. So thank you.
You're going to make me cry. Margie, thank you for saying that. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of self-interest within starting this, because same, right? Like when I got sober 20 years ago, it was like Diet Coke was basically the only NA choice. People looked at you like you had 3 eyeballs when you said, yeah, I don't drink. And they're like, are you pregnant? I'm like, no, I'm not pregnant. Also, you shouldn't ask that. So we made great strides. We also have a long ways to go, but I just need to take a minute and thank Abby, because truly you have been the most incredible partner in this work and in learning how this whole thing works together. And it's like, this is a testament of how it works, right? Like Abby's advocacy and commitment to this. And it's been so fun to watch you also like get really into it. If I can speak for you, I feel like you've gotten really into it. And I love it because probably when it first came to you, you're like, what? Like, here's this thing. Can you do it? But you've just been an amazing partner. And I'm so impressed by the culture of Olympia Hospitality. And, the fact that 50% of your employees felt safe enough to even answer that question, honestly, like also says a lot, because we talk a lot about how, really the only way of gauging like how big of an impact specifically for alcohol use disorder is today is like that survey we all take when we go to the doctor's office, and it says, how much do you drink? And I don't know about you, but when I was drinking, I did not answer that honestly, not once. I was like, I think 3 is a good answer. No one will ask me any follow-up questions. So it has gone, it's gone missed. It's gone unknown, right? We don't have the diagnoses codes. We don't have the blood test results. Like, we don't have the signals that we have for all these other disease states. And it's so embedded in our culture, Margie, like what you said, like it's so embedded in so many jobs and so just culture, social, right? Like how we bond, how we unwind, how we reward, like it is everywhere. And so it's like a tricky dance to figure out how to share this message without coming across like the prohibition movement, because that's not what we're trying to do. That does not win any favors. And also we need to speak from a place of reality, which are things like 50% know someone. And that's a lot of stress that people are carrying, worrying about themselves, their loved one. And if we can have workplaces like Olympia where people feel safe enough to talk about it at work, to find others who are on this journey, to find hope that people can recover, what would that mean for just the well-being of our employees at large, right? So very grateful to Olympia for doing this work with us.
So Abby, I want to ask another question, not to put you on the spot, but one of the things that I have struggled with as we've done this work at Sober Life Rocks is that we go to these conferences and they're either hosted at the host hotel or they're at a conference center. And these gigantic hotel chains have these distributor contracts locked up with the beverages that they can serve and can't serve. And so while we've had meeting planners who were like, yes, we want to do something that's more sober inclusive, where the conflict happens is when they get to the F&B people and they're like, well, I'm sorry, like we don't have the ability to bring in a good NA wine or beer or the bartenders themselves who are at the little black bars, they're not mixologists, right? They're just trained to sort of pour and serve. So how has your company addressed the public facing side of this?
Well, I think there's actually quite a growing business in the non-alcoholic space as far as it comes to beverage menus. I think our director of food and beverage actually did his own podcast, I believe, recently that surrounded really the non-alcoholic space and how it's such a big, they're not charging less money for a non-alcoholic beverage. I think I'm proud that all of our properties, to my knowledge, particularly because we have some branded properties, but we work in a lot of independent spaces as well. And so a lot of those spaces have a prominent non-alcoholic featured section. I was out actually at one of our properties, the Heartwood at Vassar. And, I equated it to like the fancy adult Shirley Temple that I enjoyed while I was there. Like I took a picture of it. It was pretty, but it was something that was featured on the menu. We talk about it now. One of the things that entering into this recovery friendly space has done is it launches conversation. And so at our own gatherings as a company for Olympia, we have slowly, I've seen non-alcoholic offerings be more featured because we have some sober members of our team. And it's not just one option here, or just a bottle of water. And so that is something that we're talking about, developing. But I think it's leaning into the opportunity, honestly, that you can craft an excellent cocktail or mocktail without alcohol in it and make it
Yes.
a great experience. And that's really what it is. It's about exploring the experience we can make it. It can, in fact, be more than water or Diet Coke.
And I feel like so much of the challenge really isn't intentional. It's just like a blind spot.
Mm-hmm.
And once you become aware, you can't become unaware.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It,
So last question for you, Abby, on this is what would you say to other companies, other people in HR who um, are toying with the idea of something like this?
I think the biggest message I would share is that you don't need to have everything laid out to get started. You know, it really just starts with a conversation saying, is there a need for this? You know, can we explore this? What resources do we have? I think it's a huge space, and we've started, you know, slowly. We were fortunate to get connected with Sobrynth, but since then, you know, we're still working to build our ERG group. We've now have actual policies or in our, you know, employee handbook update. You know, it's 8 months later from kind of getting into this space, we now have a formal written policy about really exploring what that means. So I think one, making sure that we understand what it means, and really it's about, I think it's about creating a culture where an employee is seen as a whole person and not just who they are when they walk through the doors. And that's something that I think I hold very near and dear to me, is that people, you know, that age old, like, oh, leave your baggage at the front door and, you know, clock in and put your name tag on. That's just not, I've been through so many chapters in my life, and our company has met me at every single one of them and accepted me for whoever I was at that time as a whole person. I don't think, you know, especially families or companies that tote value systems and being family friendly, you can't be that without looking at somebody as a whole person.
Yeah.
And so if we value our employees and we value them as whole people, then let's explore opportunities to provide them as much support in the wellness space as possible. But it just starts with a conversation. And even those that are like, well, I don't have money to toss at this. Well, 90% of what we're doing is not money related. It's really surrounding having conversation, holding space for people, identifying resources, and, you know, just leaning into that, leaning into those people.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mara, since you brought in money, I did want to actually kind of check in with you on that because all this sounds amazing, but it sounds expensive. And so from your point of view, like working with a company like Olympia or other companies, how do you position that?
yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think the reality is that, so one, we are not cost prohibitive. So I would welcome conversations to explore, you know, how we set this up and how we charge for our offering. It is 24/7 humans. So there is a cost to cover the humans who are answering the phone. We are not just an app, right? And we will have a mobile enabled platform component, which is super important. And we're really excited. It goes live in June, and Olympia will be rolling onto it then. And that enables all the employees who are seeking that like support on their own, who don't want to pick up the phone and call, but still need supportive tools. And so we've built a really robust solution there. But there's always got to be humans, because to Abby's point of around, it was so hard to navigate, find the place, who's available, who's covered by insurance, how do we get the person there? Like, there's so much going on, and our peer coaches do all of that behind the scenes, all of those phone calls to the facilities to figure out the process and to help lift that burden off of the shoulders of the individual who's in crisis and has no capacity to go figure that out. When it comes to the pricing, there's a really great tool that I encourage people to go use and look at, because it's free and it's accurate and it's amazing. And it's called the National Safety Council Calculator on Substance Use Disorder for Employers. It's a mouthful, but National Safety Council Calculator. If you type that in, it'll pop up in your Google. And it was a partnership between the National Safety Council and NORC out of the University of Chicago. And it allows you to plug in, where is my company based? How many employees do I have? And what kind of work do we do, right? What industry are we in? So to Abby's point, right, they saw 17% is hospitality, but if you average across all the industries, it's 1 in 10. But yes, some industries have more, some have a little bit less, but it roughly shakes out to 1 in 10. So this one gets really specific. And what it pops out is, here is your cost of untreated substance use disorder in the workplace right now. So if you do nothing, here is what you're spending. And the numbers are pretty astronomical. So I just ran the calculation for another company we're talking to, and they said, all right, well, we've got employees everywhere, but there's 5,000 in our Florida office. So let's run the numbers on 5,000 for our Florida office. And that shook out to be $5.6 million a year that is being spent on untreated substance use disorder. And it breaks it down into lost productivity, job turnover and retraining, and healthcare. And then it breaks it down into, and here's how many employees you can assume are suffering. Here's how many families and dependents are suffering. And here's what they're struggling with. And alcohol use disorder is always the highest by far. And then it says opioids and other drugs. So I say all that because I think because this has been an afterthought or not thought of, right? It's easy to say things like, well, we have an employee assistance program. Well, we have a mental health solution. We're probably fine. But this disease state is so nuanced, and sobriety is so personal. How you get sober, what pathway, I guarantee, Margie, you and I had different journeys, as is true with nearly everyone I know who is sober. Some went to treatment 5 times. Some, like me, went to AA and that's it. Some went to detox and then AA. Like, it is varied. And so if our only pathway we're offering employees is guidance to inpatient care, which is usually what EAP does, or to therapy, that's insufficient. That doesn't make those numbers go away, right?
And
you're still going to be spending the money.
It's 3 sessions.
Oh yeah, and by the way, you have 3 sessions to get well.
Of somebody who isn't necessarily trained in alcohol use disorder.
Yeah, so correct. Yeah. So why isn't that sufficient? Why isn't that fixing the problem? I mean, this is a healthcare crisis that we're in, and it 100% impacts the workplace. So you can either, in my opinion, you can either address it and say, let's go try to figure out, one, it's the right thing to do. Like Abby said, like, truly that is clear that is what's driving Olympia, is like, it is simply the right thing to do to care for your employees in this way. And I'm also not delusional. I recognize you need to justify it to the CFO. It also impacts your bottom line. So you can continue to ignore it and suffer the costs, which you're experiencing whether you realize it or not, or you can try to make a difference, and it's a win-win. It's a retention, it's a recruitment, and it's going to lower your spend. Like, to me, it feels like feels really obvious.
Yeah. Thank you.
But
I'd love for you to do as we wrap this up is, do you have any other stories of the impact this has made on an individual?
Yes. And I will keep it anonymous, but one of the calls that we received was an individual who was seeking care, who was in a situation where they were unhoused, living in a hotel, caretaking for an aging parent, in a relationship with someone who is also suffering from substance use disorder, and needed tangible help, but could not go to inpatient care because they were, in that moment, they said that's not an option. And so our peer coach was able to help navigate to other pathways, like outpatient care, like virtual AA meetings, like in-person AA, right? In ways that fit within the schedule. We don't control the outcomes. I know for me, I took that first quiz of, are you drinking too much, when I was 18, and I aced it. And it took me until I was 24 to actually get sober, which is still really young. And I was, saved a lot of years because my dad was sober and my uncles were sober. And so I knew there was another path. My hope is that with these calls that we're getting from these employees who are seeking help, and that we can give them the different pathways and the different options and the information and the reminder that we're always here, that we at least plant some seeds for them to help shorten the pathway of their suffering. I know it works when directors talk about it. That's the other one I'll end on is when direct managers give permission, the data shows that it directly correlates to someone seeking help. The biggest influence that you can have is when you're a direct people leader and you tell your team, you are safe to get help with alcohol and drugs at this company. If you're struggling, call Sobrynth. And we've gotten those calls of people who say, my boss told me I could call you. I was ready to quit because I can't stop drinking. I'm in the middle of a relapse. I was sober before and I can't stop drinking, but my boss told me don't quit, call Sobrynth. And so that's our hope, is that people feel, we're not going to save everyone, but can we help, to your point, Margie, can we help people who are there seeking help right now today? I really believe we can, and we are, and excited for the journey ahead.
I mean, thank you, both of you. Like, showing what's possible when companies lead with that empathy and lead with that intention. What I'm taking away is that recovery-friendly workplaces aren't just nice to have, right? They're powerful for all the things you just said, the well-being, the retention, but also I feel like even as an employee, as a leader in a company like that, like I would feel proud and fulfilled to know that this is what my company did and this is what my company stood for. So if you are listening and you're any kind of leader or HR professional or just somebody who wants your workplace to be more inclusive, take action. Don't just wish about it. Advocate for resources, advocate for the conversation just to start. Like, build policies that reflect employee safety around this topic. And if you don't know where to start, reach out to Sobrynth and learn how your organization can begin this journey.
Thank you, Margie.
Absolutely. And of course, if you want to be part of the bigger movement, please join us at Amplify Sober Voices. Our conference is going to be on January 15th, 2026. And it's where we're going to have these sorts of conversations and talk amongst all of the people who are really working in this sober awareness field. So please join us. Visit amplifysobervoices.com to register. Together, we're not just breaking the stigma, we are building workplaces where recovery can thrive. Thank you.